which is on the Planning and Zoning's annual priority list to review and update in the coming year. And currently, all of the vacant lands in the SMIC area, this recommendation to council, and council adopted it back in 2014, all of the lands in the SMIC area the recommendation was to retain ownership and that they were available for lease. One of them had keep an eye on the shoreline, and the other one had keep with the current lessee and continue development of uplands as a support area to North Dock. And in the intro to this area, it said that we recommend that utilities be extended throughout the area to encourage development. So I hope we hear in this work session what's happened with extending utilities, and I hope to hear from PACAB on how they would like to see changes to these uplands. So I'm going to turn it over to Jackie unless Laura has something she wants to add.
No, Jackie, take it away. Thank you.
So I sent everybody, I'm going to share my screen so I can just start the presentation. I just, for the record, if I can just state everybody that's in attendance. So we do have Nathaniel Charbonneau, Claire Sullivan, Linda Paquette, Gary Cease, Benjamin Smith, Colby Lawrence, Craig Ambrosiani, Laura Schneider, Tom Swan, and Cindy Eklund, and Vanessa Verhey. So that's everyone that is here right now. Just this meeting tonight is, sort of a caveat to our January of 2019 meeting. We discussed having an overlay and what the needs were going to be for an overlay. And that meeting was really dove into what the uses are, and we had discussed previously, thing was that we have industrial use here on this side of the bay, and we have industrial use on the other side of the bay. And they get merged together when they might possibly need to have an overlay that is just dealing with the SMIC area, because some things are not allowed in an industrial area that has been needed or expressed that there is a need for. So I'll go ahead and start my presentation and we'll go from there. First I have to share my screen. That would help, wouldn't it? So can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So just the very first page, the picture that I have there is from the SMIC study that was done a while back. I think it was in 2016. They had a multiple work sessions of how they would, people throughout the community, throughout the state implemented and said what they sort of would like to see. So it's just, I wanted to make sure that we incorporated that, because I do believe that PACAB works constantly on that SMIC development plan, and this is just helping lead us into that direction. This presentation is sort of to educate everyone on what an overlay is. We have a lot of new members on both sides, I think, and just to give a generalization of what we're looking at. So this map that says SMIC 2020 is current imagery that was done last summer of the SMIC area. And then the one with the purple and gray is our current zoning map. So the purple is everything that's industrial, the gray is institutional, and the gray is the correction facility. So just so everyone understands the layout a little bit. what an overlay does and what this tool is that we really need to use is, you know, as commissions, both PACAB and planning and zoning, you know, what do we want to do with an overlay and the possibility of it? So this is to, you know, regulatory tool that creates the special zoning districts, that gives us the ability to identify special provisions in it, and then what shares the common boundaries as well as the base zone. So common uses, just like it says, overlay zones may be applied to protect, encourage / discourage specific types of development or historical areas. A community might use incentives along a transit corridor to encourage higher development densities, target uses or control appearances, and then land with historical overlays may be subject to separate requirements. Potential uses. The potential uses of an overlay is to encourage economic development, promote specific development projects, promote mixed use of development, or preserve and enhance a special district. The way that the implementation works, when reviewing a project of any size, the overlay zone is the most important is the development be consistent with not only the goals and objectives of the overlay, but our long-term goals and strategies that are over municipal in our comprehensive plan. There's 3 of them. So number 1 is define the purpose of the district, define the areas that make up our district, and develop a specific rules that apply to the identified districts. So the current zoning, as we've said before, is industrial district. It's an established district which in the principal use of land is for business, manufacturing, processing, fabricating, repair, assembly, storage, wholesale, distribution operations which may create some nuisance and which are not properly associated nor compatible with residential land uses. It is intended to provide an environmental safeguards for people employed in or visiting the district, or by conditional use. So that gives a little bit of highlight of that area and how you could adapt an overlay to accommodate those things. So the basic steps.
Excuse me, Jackie, can we go back to the housing? Just a second, it's Cindy.
Yep.
There is currently, housing is only allowed over there as an apartment in a business, is that correct?
It's not even as an apartment in a business. The only thing that's allowed over there is a watchman's house. So, you know, it would be, yeah, it's just, there's nothing that is in the dwelling range that's allowed by our code.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Continue.
Just a clarification though, isn't there an outright or conditional option for a I don't remember what it's called, dormitory or bunkhouse? I thought that there was, as long as as there weren't bathroom facilities in each location. And then I thought that there was, you could have one apartment but not 2 or more. Just looking back at that first page. So dwelling apartment in a commercial building, 2 or more units is not allowed, but I thought that 1 was.
I think you're correct, Laura. I looked today at this at the whole map, not just what's not allowed, but there is some other dwelling allowed over there. I don't know how much more PACAB has discussed or our constituents have discussed with you, but I thought that it was allowed in an apartment was allowed somewhere else. A dwelling. A watchman is allowed. A bunkhouse is allowed with a conditional use.
Would you like me to continue?
Yes, go ahead, Jackie. If I find it, I'll speak up at the desk when you're done. Thanks.
Okay. So as I was saying, so I broke these down to everything that's not allowed in an industrial area and just gave you the overlay. If it says CP, it means that it is a conditional use along with a permit. And if it's OP, it means that it has to have, it's outright, but it still requires a permit. So, back to the basic steps to create an overlay district. We need to consider whether the same policy framework could be achieved through amending to the zoning district or creating a new district. We need to identify the area of an overlay district. What is the basis for these boundaries? And we need to establish a policy framework through planning and study or the SMIC master plan update. So these were uses that were discussed at our January 22nd, 2019 meeting. This is just, again, to highlight the things that were brought up or talked about at that meeting. It wasn't so much, Jackie, this is what we want to happen over there, but I just wanted to show you, again, how these uses are zoned throughout our zoning map of the city and how, you know, you could incorporate either a new zoning district or this overlay district to encompass or add these different uses.
Okay, I found the other use that is allowed outright there, and it is in the dwelling section of our zoning uses, and it's a dwelling, apartment in a commercial building limited to 1 unit. That and then the watchman are the two. So if we want to expand it to some other types of dwelling, I'll also see what it said for bunkhouse, Laura.
So, Madam
Yeah,
Chair,
I think, oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
bunkhousing is allowed by conditional use. We have had, you guys did have an application come forward through planning and zoning a year ago. It was approved with the agreement that they would connect to city services, and then through the process, it was determined that what they wanted to bring down did not meet current building requirements, and so that bunkhouse was canceled.
Right, it's housing bunkhouse is allowed under conditional use permit, but the watchman and the dwelling are allowed outright. The apartment in a commercial building is allowed outright, watchman allowed outright, and the other is conditional use.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I only did what wasn't allowed because that was the discussion and the direction that the two commissions sort of went in 2019 was like, let's focus on what's not allowed and how we can possibly help with the economy over there as well as the growth and the need for bunk housing and those type of things. So I didn't include any uses that were allowed in the industrial area.
Okay, all right.
So
You can go ahead.
it's critical that the zoning provisions offer a very clear guidance to both the property owners and, of course, the city of Seward that's charged with approving these proposals. Zoning requirements must be applied equally over all properties within the district, and the ordinance must not only comply with ours, but any borough, state, or federal regulations. But it needs to also be consistent with the goals and objectives and policies of the municipality's comprehensive plan, as well as, I would say, you know, that comp plan also lies in with the SMIC plan, so those developments. It's important that the local body involved with the public really clarifies the reasons for these mapping districts. I would suggest, and you know, through education, giving, you know, everybody the ability to attend work sessions, discuss how, changing or adding to an overlay would give targeted developers and anybody that's affected, they're willing to comply with any new requirements that were required. The procedures for adopting the overlay district are the same as for adopting a zoning or a rezoning provision. So the provisions, as well as any changes to the zoning maps, would need to be approved by not only planning and zoning, but also by the council. So these questions are very important when it comes to dealing with a overlay in general. So we want to know, how will the new standards and guide development in a way that reflects our vision or our policies? And what will the overlay district regulate, and how is it different from the original underlying zoning? So I just took some excerpts out of the 2016 SMIC Upland study. So it says revenues to SMIC and to the city would be further enhanced with the introduction of retail commercial activities such as hotel accommodations, convenience shopping, food, restaurant services that generate tax receipts to the city. And then there was also another section that said, what were some of the weaknesses or things that needed to be done. A weakness was the lack of housing over there. So it was consider these zoning modifications to permit the inclusion of housing, convenient shopping, and food services at SMIC as the area becomes further developed. So this is a little report card, and I look at these 6 things as how do we justify an overlay zoning, and is it something that's workable? And so as we move further along, or as the 2 commissions decide the direction that that you want to go, I really suggest that you use this report card method. You have your commissioners, fill it out. You incorporate it into any education that gives the ability for any community members to give these grades and these failing, excellent to failing, so they can incorporate that and we can use it statistically. And that is all I have. I wanted to also just bring up, let me share this other part of my screen. I wanted to bring up the zoning map. Can you see that? Nope, I still have you on the wrong thing. There we go, I got it. So, can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so just so I wanted to bring up the borough map so you could see the areas. Like I stated earlier, this is Alaska DNR. This area is City of Seward. All of this area, the SMIC general area is City of Seward. Those are leases. This parcel and this parcel are owned by a private individual. I know that over the years there has been some discussion about somebody purchasing and possibly building out there, but again, it was to build housing of some sort, and as it stands right now, I think the housing that they were looking at is not allowed in. They were looking at a larger scale instead of just an apartment. And then the City of Seward has this area. This is private land that's also zoned institutional, if it does it. And then this is it's going to take a second. This area here is the large bench, which everyone, when they talk about the bench, that is incorporated in this parcel. So I just wanted to give that actual imagery so you could see it, you could see where we're talking about and the portions that are owned by the city and the layout.
I just want to mention Matt Chase is on the phone. If anyone needs him, he's on the line.
Okay.
But he's not in as a panelist.
Jackie, Linda has her hand up. Linda, do you have a question?
My only question was, can we get a better graphic or a better version of the cover page of the presentation? That's a very interesting graphic, but it's not clear enough to be able to read most of the words.
Ms. Paquette,
And maybe not now. I don't necessarily mean tonight, but I'd love to see that graphic.
yeah, that
But I
graphic
can't read what we got.
that graphic is about 12 foot long. But we do have it. I have it, and I can, you could come and look at it. I'll pull it out. But it's also really incorporated in that 2016 plan. And if you guys don't have that, I can make sure to give you that, because there's two different portions. There's the portion of, all the sort of round table meetings, but then there's the portion of the statistics and what they came up with and the answers, the surveys they sent out. So if you don't have it, I'll make sure that PACAB has a copy.
Yeah, Jackie, I think it's been a while since that's been sent out, so I think some of our new members may not have it. So if you could send that out to the group, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I've been looking through what is allowed over in SMIC, and I think, they allow, there's a lot allowed that, I'm not sure, Matt Chase, if you hear me, but did you add the golf driving range to what's allowed? But, there's a greenhouse and a nursery and a fast food drive-in facility, a restaurant, a recreation or shooting range with a conditional use, recycle center are outright, bowling, skating are allowed outright, lumber yards, laundry, dry cleaning, light manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, you have to have a conditional use permit, transit merchants, mobile vendors, charter boat guide offices. There's a lot allowed on that side of SMIC. So I'd like to hear from PACAB what happens when someone comes and wants to do one of these things. How much, I know we've had some development over there. I know we've had some conditional use permits come before us. One was for building heights. We've had some replats for vacating lot lines. What else have people been interested in having over there?
Yeah, so I don't know if the commission knows that the planner came and joined us at a work session a couple months ago, and so we kind of were able to have a pre-discussion as a board about what kinds of things were that we might want from an overlay. And one of the main things is housing, specifically housing for workers working in the industrial district. I think that is one of the main concerns. Added on to that is when you have more people living out there, having there be the ability for some additional services, like a convenience store.
That's allowed.
A convenience store is allowed.
It's allowed outright right now. A grocery convenience store is allowed outright in the industrial area.
Okay, I just saw that there was another convenience store one that wasn't on that list of things that weren't allowed. So I think that the main thing that we're talking about is housing. If we were to go back to Jackie's presentation and the things that were discussed at that last work session, you'll see that most of those things discussed are different versions of just saying housing. I'm looking at some of the other things on here. Personal services was another thing that was discussed. Business, retail, sales, and service. So there is there's a separate line item for business marine sales and service. and that is allowed outright, but other sales and service businesses are not.
What about fuel?
Fuel.
Fuel and bulk storage and sales are allowed under a conditional use permit.
Okay. Again, I guess I'm referencing this list from the presentation, just showing the things that, all the things that aren't allowed. The other thing that's not allowed is, and I guess here with drinking establishment, if restaurants are allowed outright, are they allowed to get a permit for liquor sales at a restaurant?
Right now.
So can I answer that for you? Right now, liquor sales are not allowed out there, and as far as retail sales, it has to be an industrial use. If you look at those, it says business retail sales / services is not allowed, and then retail sales / industrial, which is allowed outright. So the retail sales part would be industrial type sales. It wouldn't be your convenience store discussion.
But convenience stores are allowed out there.
I have the whole thing, I don't know where you're talking, Matt. Is it under convenience store?
It says groceries, convenience store outright in the industrial area.
Oh, I found it, I'm sorry. It was a grocery store / supermarket or food market that's not allowed.
But a convenience store is.
Yes.
Which I think is the most likely option out there versus a full-blown supermarket. So the other thing which is already allowed outright that a lot of people have talked about is a restaurant or brew pub type establishment, because we get that late sun. I know whenever possible I try to end my day at SMIC if I can do that. I try to start it on the Harper side and end it on the SMIC side.
And
the late light.
The brew pub is allowed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I see that. I think that that's been part of the discussion, because I don't think that everyone realized that. So that's good to put that to rest. So to know that the convenience store and the restaurant are allowed. And I'd like to open it up to other members of my board if they have anything to add. But again, the housing is the #1 issue, specifically worker housing. That's not necessarily a dormitory a bunkhouse, where you can't have private bathrooms. Because if you want to attract skilled labor, a lot of times they're not going to want to live in communal housing, especially not long term. And we're trying to get people that want to come and stay in Seward and work in Seward long term. So having those long term options around the industrial area, we think that that is a use that could be compatible with other industrial uses. Something like shop space with apartments above it, I think would be really great out there. The other thing we discussed at the work session that we had with the planner previously was that the proposals that have been brought forward in the past to have a subdivision out there with actual multifamily housing. And I feel like that is it's not a separate discussion, but I feel like if that's going to happen, if we're actually going to have an area dedicated to a neighborhood, that we're not maybe talking about an overlay at that point, but a rezone. So I wanted to put that back to planning and zoning. I listened to a lot of your meetings, and I know how much you hate spot zoning. And so looking at the map, the zoning map currently, where the sawmill is, that land is industrial and has industrial uses, and I foresee that staying industrial land for the foreseeable future. So if we take that land that's in between where the sawmill used to be and where the SMIC boatyard starts, I guess my question is that an area that planning and zoning sees as being a viable area for home development, or what are your guys' thoughts on that matter?
I'll I'll speak up here. And we're just talking about thoughts. You know, when you're looking at 20, 40, 50, 80 years down the road from now, I mean, what do we see there 100 years from now?
Yeah.
That's what we do now affects 100 years from now. What happens over there affects what happens over here. I mean, we have a very touristy residential area on this side, but we know we're really working on developing a marine industry. And does the marine industry, by our zoning, gets forced over there? Maybe it's a little slower than we want and stuff, but how much of our marine industry, you know, where is it going to be way down the road? And so I have kind of an issue with trying to take some of that and saying, hey, we're going to put single-family homes in an area that 50, 100 years from now, we definitely see as, hey, we're working on ships over there. And we've been moving that direction. I've been around 20 years. We're definitely moving that direction in that area and moving more things over there. So I would have a difficult, I could see a hotel and I could see some things, but, you know, it's not that far away. I mean, there's this mental picture here in Seward that, hey, you've got to be able to walk everywhere. I mean, you want to be right on top, and it's you know, there is housing not that far away for single family. And so, anyway, I just want to bring up that it's you know, go ahead, Jackie.
That's why we're here tonight, you know, to discuss how, would an overlay work? Do we need to look at doing a different district that is a marine district that has these, you know, wants and needs that could possibly happen over there in the future? And one of the things that I really sort of lean towards is, you know, a planned unit development. That gives, you know, if you added that in an overlay and gave the ability for developers to come to the council and come to the commission and say, here is our plan, this is what we want to do with the land, and give the people that own the private property the ability to, you know, explore those options without have to spending the money on our side, you know, and not doing spot zoning, because Laura, you're right, we don't like spot zoning. But that area would be bigger than an acre. But it's one of those things, we don't want to tell somebody what they have to absolutely do. You know, like if you want to build a subdivision, then come forward. But I can tell you that those individuals, because of what they're zoned, they are holding back because they're like, okay, well, we don't want to get into this big hurrah and have all this money go into it. So if you guys did an overlay that, you know, had restrictions and had layouts that didn't so much mirror what we have over here, but what that area is used for. Yes, and you know, I keep saying, make it a marine industrial zone, adding the ability for planned unit development. That covers what planning and zoning, what PACAB, I mean, it gives everybody the ability to come forward with their plans laid out in front of us.
Okay, Jackie, I'm just going to go off of a couple of things you said and back to some Laura said. Right now, the city owns the whole area. There is no privately owned. And
no, there's two
are you
large.
saying there is?
There are two
Which
large
two?
plats. Let me share my screen again with you.
Okay, and while you're looking for that, I'm looking at the dwelling, multifamily, 3 or more units in our land uses allowed table, and there are conditional use permits required in 7 other zones. There is no outright dwelling multifamily, but in R3, urban residential, office residential, auto commercial, harbor commercial, central business, and resource management, you can come before the planning and zoning with a plan and ask for a conditional use permit to build a multifamily dwelling, 3 or more units in any of those areas. I think it would be easy to add in industrial area a C onto our land uses allowed table to allow a dwelling, multifamily, 3 or more units in the SMIC area.
Madam Chair,
So, are
I
you
have
talking about the bench?
no, I'm not talking about the
Oh, no.
bench. I'm talking about these
Okay.
2 pieces of property. But I also want to remind PACAB and Planning and Zoning that if you make changes to the industrial alone, it also makes the changes to the industrial on this side. And that was one of the things that got brought up a lot was, you know, those are things that, you know, like, let's just say the 3 apartments or threeplex. It's not something that people are asking for or wanting over on this side of the industrial area. And so that's why this overlay would come into play. You know, you have your industrial areas, but the SMIC overlay would allow those type of things, a threeplex to be allowed, you know, by conditional use. But when you change it just under industrial, you're changing it for both sides of the bay.
But it is a conditional use process which requires a public hearing where people who are not in favor of it have every opportunity to come and speak their mind on that issue. So there's that caveat that allows someone who is not in favor of a multifamily dwelling unit in an industrial area to speak their mind.
And
So, but the overlay could take it in a different direction. Go ahead, Laura.
no, I was just going to say, I think that there may be opportunities on the harbor side where there are, you know, I just feel like we have to get creative. I'll say that I think that there are areas on the harbor side too that could benefit from multifamily dwellings in the industrial area. Again, I'm thinking kind of that model where you have a business underneath and an apartment up above, and I think that that's something that could be done in a sustainable way on both sides of the bay. So I'm really liking this idea about maybe just changing the land uses allowed table and not doing something special for the SMIC side. I'm definitely open to that.
You know, my mind goes back to a visit to an apartment right across from the docks in Seattle. I mean, you had your boat, your tug across the street, and across the street was the convenience store where you picked up the morning paper and your latte, and you had this beautiful apartment which was over top of a small shopping center, and you lived and worked and ate, and everything was right there for you. You know, you didn't have to go downtown. You didn't have to go anywhere but, you know, to the airport when you were flying out. And that's kind of what I'm picturing with a convenience store. The personal services, I'm not sure which personal services you mean, like a barber so they can get their hair cut, things like that. So I think we can do things like that, you know, personal services. They're allowed in most business districts now, you know, so I think we can add those things if those are things that the PACAB has heard that people want that work over in that area. So I know Laura asked other PACAB members to chime in. I only see my P&Z people on this side, so I can't see hands. So
Colby
Laura,
has
you see
his
hands
hand.
from here.
Yeah, Colby.
Colby.
I think maybe this isn't the right place, but I think one of the things that I've heard from a lot of constituents is they would like to do something over there, but they don't want to lease the property. And I know that it's been a conversation that's gone back and forth, but allowing private enterprise to own the land is, I think, affording the city opportunity for maybe better things to be built, and whether it's housing or convenience stores or more industry over there, you know, I think that it's something important to think about, because you can do this overlay, and sure, with the two private pieces of land there, people will be able to purchase and own the land, but if I were to go to a bank and say that I'm going to get a 99-year or a 49-year lease on this property, they're not even going to loan me the money to do this. So it's just something I think that should be thought about is being able to get that land for sale over there in SMIC. That's my 2 cents.
Well, that's good, Colby. I mean, we do have the municipal land management plan up for review, and that is a good talking point when we bring that forward.
Chair Eklund, Linda Paquette has her hand raised.
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, I agree with what Colby said, and I love the description that Cindy was giving. I think that if we want to envision what's going to happen in the next 100 years, creating a place like what Cindy described is certainly fitting, and would be attractive to people. It would draw people. And I just wanted to stress that, contrary to what Commissioner Swan said, everything that I hear in just about every meeting I go to is that we don't have enough affordable housing. And so I really think creating a place where there can be nice places to live, not just bunk houses. And what Laura said earlier, having decent places for workers to come and live in will attract decent workers. Offering up places where you have to share the bathroom is sort of, it's just not. I don't see the future of workers really embracing that kind of living environment. It's not attractive to people. So that's my feedback. I really think it's housing is the primary thing, and I think if we can avoid an overlay, that would be great. And it's sounding like there's a good argument to be able to avoid an overlay.
Madam Chair, Benjamin Smith has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Benjamin.
Hey, sorry if I don't know if I was buffering there pretty bad. I don't know if Colby maybe hit on this, but it seems like the entire the entire reason for discussing any residential over there is to support workers at SMIC and have some place for them to live when they come to town. The common phenomenon in Seward, if you put affordable housing, it turns into Airbnb during the summer or something like that, right? So how is it that we could set up something that would remain viable year-round? The market force is just way too overpowering for. It's nice over there in the summer, right? So
They're all there.
yeah. So yeah, I appreciate any. I don't see how to do it, but what tools do we have?
Well, we only allow B&Bs in certain zoning districts, and so I don't think B&Bs are allowed in industrial. If we did allow the dwelling multifamily in industrial, I don't think it could legally right now be turned into a B&B.
So there's a separate line item then for house rental on a nightly basis, which is allowed by permit in a lot of these districts, but not in industrial. So even if the land uses allowed table was changed to allow multifamily dwellings, that wouldn't automatically make it viable for nightly rentals.
Okay, and more than nightly though, I mean, the money's going to talk. So when we're talking about affordable housing, Seward summer rental rates, even on a monthly basis, would be a driving factor. And I was thinking about this based on my experience with AppTech students. They get kicked out every May. It's just the way that the town works, and they're living in a tent for the last month. And I just foresee that putting nice places over there, it's going to be very hard to keep that focus towards what our primary goal is. But thank you for those clarification points, though.
So one thing I can speak to on that, then, having been in several communities that have kind of areas like this that are meant for workers, is that not everyone wants to live in an industrial area, and I agree that beautiful housing will draw people in, but a lot of times too, it's going to be the businesses that are building these residences for their workers specifically, or businesses that are building them for the industry specifically. And I know that I'm not sure there is a way to prevent against, someone seeing the opportunity and exploiting it. But from what I have seen, that's not what happens in those areas. That that people tend to be self-selecting for who wants to live there. So I guess maybe I'm too optimistic, but I don't see that being too much of a problem, simply because the people wanting to build right now are the people who own marine businesses. And they're the people who have leases out there currently that would build on those lands. That land that they currently have leased on are marine businesses that want to build housing for the industry. But again, I'm an optimist, so that won't necessarily.
Tom?
Just a little clarification there on the B&B thing. I mean, there's a line there as far as houses rented on a nightly basis. But I don't think there's any restriction. If somebody owns a house, they can rent half their rooms nightly. Okay, and then you're going to get into a cross section there. Now you have an industry over there, and somebody wants to bring up a worker for 4 days. That's a nightly. That's the same thing as a B&B or a hotel. I mean, you're crossing over some things. So and I'm not saying anything either direction. I'm just bringing some information to the table here as far as what you're trying to accomplish. And the other part is when we get to positions like, I mean, I've been in this business for a long time, the B&B business. In 2007, if there was a room available, it was rented nightly. You could not find, people were having to be sent back to Anchorage because there's no rooms available. We were getting to about that same level right before, in the last couple of years, we've gotten to the point where any room that was available anywhere in the valley was being rented for nightly tourism. And so, the idea that you're going to, go over there and say, oh, we're going to have these rooms that are going to be for our working staff, but, oh, shoot, let tourists come in, they're going to pay for it. They're going to pay the money and the stuff's going to switch over, unless it is exactly what Laura was saying, is that the businesses that are over there are providing lodging for their workers. Then you really can control it. And I love the idea that, someone has a business and they live above it. Look at downtown Seward in the original, 100 years ago. Everybody that owned a business in downtown Seward lived above their business. That makes your business affordable, because now I can build my work area and I can live above it, and now I can afford it, rather than having a house 5 miles away and drive to another building. It gets a lot more expensive. So, I see all those things as being very effective as far as trying to bring, people in. Not quite sure how to accomplish that.
Hey, Jackie, can you read the definition of dwelling from our definitions in the code? Because, we have dwelling, which covers attached single family, group home, guest house, multifamily, two-family or duplex, and a watchman or caretaker. And then we have lodging, which that's where the B&B and the nightly rentals and the opportunity to,
Do you want me
rent
to
on a
read?
nightly basis.
Do you want me to give
The
you
dwelling.
all the definitions of dwelling? And all or just the general?
The dwelling, just give the one that's multifamily right now.
Okay, so dwelling, a building designed or used exclusively for living quarters for one or more families. And multifamily is a building designed as a residence for 3 or more families with the number of families in the residence not exceeding the number of dwelling units provided and each living independently under one roof.
Is there a definition just for the word dwelling?
Yes, that's what I had previously stated, the dwelling, a building designed or used exclusively as living quarters for 1 or more families.
Okay. So we're also going to work on our definitions in the coming year. So if we make the definition of dwelling something that doesn't allow nightly use, that could help with the allowing dwelling in the SMIC area.
April 20th.
So, April 20th, we're covering definitions? Great.
Yes.
If I could just add a little nuance to this conversation too, I think that nightly rentals is also, someone was saying, I don't remember who was saying someone wants to put up their employees for 4 nights. That is also a real concern. And that, I don't know how to parlay this into what the terms are in our zoning code, but the term that I know is man camp. Right, so I think that that's more like the bunkhouse model where everyone has a separate room, but then there's a communal kitchen. A lot of times the meals are provided, and so that is allowed outright now. And I just wanted to clarify that that is an outright use allowed under the current zoning code. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that a model of that sort is already allowed. And the only reason that wasn't going to work with the person that put in an application was because of the actual dwelling units that they wanted to use for it. Is that
Yeah, the units that they had proposed in their conditional use, basically they were units from the slope, and they have to have different requirements to be brought down here, and so the requirements that were requested through through building process, they came up with saying it just wasn't worth it because of the cost of moving the units, and then they wanted them to be affixed, having it, they were looking at having a separate type of septic system, but they were requiring that it be connected to city services. So there were a lot of factors there, but it just didn't meet those standards. But, nothing's saying that they couldn't come back and say, we're going to build one that meets the standards, and that would be through a CUP process.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Linda, I see you've got your hand raised again.
Yeah, so, thank you. I'm thinking of my own business, and although my own business is a lodging business, and we're not talking about having those over there, but I think that what we employees is probably a reasonable model. So we have 2 apartments that are for our employees when we have them, when we need them. And those apartments just sit there, and if it's the off season and we don't have any employees and we have family or somebody that might visit for a week or so or a weekend, we might put them out there. But those apartments just sit there until we have employees that need them. And the employees that, when we need them, they might, like sometimes they're from Anchorage and they might come and work for a week and then they might go back. And then they might come back again another, for 3 weeks, or they might stay all summer. So I think that whatever we build, we need to have a model that will accommodate that kind of sort of transient housing for employees that is still nice. It's not bunk houses, it's not soft-sided tents. They're nice places, and they may or may not be occupied all the time.
Right. And just, I guess one thought on that, Linda, is that a bunkhouse doesn't necessarily have to be something where you're where you're thinking it's a bunch of bunks in one room. I think that's a term that's used, but if you look at the definition of it, the only thing that makes it a bunkhouse versus a multi-family dwelling is it's individual rooms and they can't have their own bathrooms. So it has to be shared bathrooms, but it can still be private rooms.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and that's a model that does work really well for that kind of transient, for those transient workers, I think. But I agree. I agree with your premise that we need to have safe, reliable housing that's available whenever these workers do come to town, because it's a real problem.
Yeah, and one of our units is a two-bedroom. And so we do, like, when we're using J1 students, it's such nice housing compared to what some people give their J1 students, that they don't mind sharing a bedroom. They have a bathroom they share, and they share the kitchen, and they don't have their own private bedrooms, So, I think a variety of accommodations should be available to be able to be built by businesses for their employees.
Craig has his hand raised, Madam Chair.
Craig, go ahead.
So I have two things. It sounds like folks are looking for an option for a variety of housing over in SMIC to be able to grow housing over there, but not to let it be overrun by the B&B market and take it away from the employers in SMIC. That doesn't sound too hard to do. We have talked about ways of limiting the amount of B&B that you can do in a certain area. Those are things, and I don't know if you need an overlay to do that or if you can do it with the current zoning. The other thing is, what about infrastructure? I mean, when you start putting people in restaurants and housing over there, you're going to need fire department and police, and where does that come in this process?
Well, I think they have a fire station over there now. I'm not sure how often the city police cars go all the way out there. Laura, do you work over there? I know Matt works over there. Who else works over there that knows how often the area is patrolled?
Yeah, I can tell you that, but Tom is waving his hand in front of us.
So go ahead, Tom.
Well, go ahead and finish that discussion. When that discussion is done, I have an idea on how something can be. But finish that discussion. We don't need to keep breaking it up.
So we had a great discussion earlier this year, end of last year, with our fire chief about the growth at SMIC and what we can look forward to. And the replat that was just done out there is of that land where the fire trainer is for a fire station out at SMIC. So that is something that the fire department is definitely on board. They definitely want to be kept in the loop as development is made, but that's part of the growth plan out there. So it would be a combined police fire station, maybe. That was one of the ideas, so that there could be more of a police presence. But it's definitely something we've been talking about. We talk about it every time we do the SMIC development plan. It's right in the plan that we're evaluating everything through that lens so that we're not forgetting about that public safety aspect as we grow things. I know that they have some projects in the works to make sure that the whole feeder system is looped out at SMIC, and so things are moving in the right direction, but definitely supporting and pushing for the development of that fire station, I think, is one of the keystones to making anything happen out there.
Yes, it will help with everyone's insurance rates. Go ahead, Tom.
So I know that the housing out there, or we could open up additional types of housing in the area with a conditional use permit. And I don't know if it'd be possible to then maybe use an overlay district or some other method to specify the specific type of housing that the city wants to see developing over there, but specifying it in such a way that gives P&Z the power that when somebody pulls up a conditional use permit, if it doesn't meet that criteria, then it wouldn't go forward. So then if a business says, hey, I want to build, housing for my employees, and I want to have some bunkhouse, some apartments, because some of the things, if you want to have somebody that comes in that's an $80,000 or $120,000 a year craftsman worker, he's not going to be in a bunkhouse. That guy's not going to take that job, and he needs a lodging for 3 or 4 months until he figures out what he wants to do. If he's going to live here, then he'll go get his house, type of thing. But to develop the area, we need to bring tradesmen in. So tradesmen need a higher level. So, I definitely see the need where businesses over there will want to provide a higher quality of housing. That concept of saying we have a specific type of housing we want, and then being able to control it through the conditional use permit, I don't know if that would be viable.
And just to clarify, that's what Mr. Swan was saying. When you guys make the decision of what you want to see over there, then you look at that overlay. Is it changing, not only just allowing housing, but there's been a lot of talk, there's a lot of variances that have to be done for the SMIC height, so those things come into play, and that overlay is a perfect example of how that would work. You have these restrictions that are only in this area, and it's mapped out, just like our historic district has the red line. This is just lays over the existing zoning, but gives these restrictions, whether it be housing, whether it be, the height requirements, the connection to utilities. Ms. Eklund had asked about that earlier. I can tell you that, it has been something that has always been discussed when leases come up, to have people attached to city services. But over on the SMIC side, it falls under this one category that doesn't require them to connect to those services, and it allows us, the city, to be responsible. And that main one is because we do not have a fire station over there. And that is why that replat came forward, and that is the direction they're looking at the future with not only the SMIC, but with the Coast Guard and with the needs that are happening out there. So I just wanted to put that out.
Thank you for those reminders.
Linda
All right,
has
is there
her hand.
anyone else? Who does?
Linda has her hand raised.
Go ahead, Linda.
I'm wondering if it's possible to do something like a service area over there where there's some form of tax collected from all of the property owners in that industrial area that would help fund a manned fire police combo department, and would help sort of support the growth of the infrastructure that's needed over there, that they're required, that they basically, by being there, they really are requiring that it exists. And it doesn't exist at this point readily. So just, I know when you're outside the borough, you can have a service area, and that's how you do that. That's how you fund, like a fire department or something. So, I don't know what the structure is, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you.
Would that be like an assessment district? Could that follow the assessment district model?
I
Close
think that inside the city we have, we're looking towards some options for to help subdividing. And so I'm not sure we called it an assessment district. I know that the borough has assessment districts. I know the borough has service areas, but Jackie, you were shaking your head.
So,
Do we have assessment districts?
we do have assessment districts. They're normally just for the utilities, but the city also has, you know, the ability to make sort of like, to combine it in and have that service district. It might, I mean, it's a good discussion to bring forward that could possibly be done over on the SMIC side.
Yeah, I agree. All right, anyone else with their hand up?
Colby?
Colby has his hand up.
Go ahead, Colby.
Thank you. I like what Linda just said. I think it's a great idea to think about and to have a talking point. I think something to think about, though, is a manned fire station is very different than an unmanned fire station. And you have housing development over there. Maybe you get some volunteer firefighters that are living there that can respond more quickly, because the Seward Volunteer Fire Department is a long way away from SMIC, and it takes a while to get there. So I think everything goes hand in hand that we're talking about: housing, fire departments, police departments, you know, businesses. So just having a fire department over there doesn't mean that the resource is going to be used properly, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone on P&Z? Anyone on PACAB have?
Linda has her hand raised.
Remember some? Who?
Linda?
Go ahead, Linda.
Just to tack on what Colby was saying, exactly, if you have places for people to live, then you can actually man it with volunteers. So it is all tied together, really. Over.
You know, I have one question, which I apologize because I think this broadens the discussion, but you guys look at this so much more than I do. I know that I got really excited when I heard there was some private property that someone wanted to develop out there, because in my mind, what we always hear as citizens of Seward is there's nowhere to expand. Like, there is no land for new development. But I know that in reality that must not be true, but I think that I got excited because I was like, I didn't realize these parcels existed, and if there's someone wanting to develop them, when we're looking at that long-term view, I agree that I don't want to fall into the trap of giving up this industrial land and never getting it back, but I also want our community to be able to grow, and I want everyone who wants housing to have good housing. And so I guess I'm just throwing it back to P&Z to say, do you feel that even without this land that we have enough room as a community to grow? Sorry, that's a big, broad question, but that's where my head is at.
You know,
I guess.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I guess you know, part of that is that when they talk about land in the city, that's not necessarily the same thing as land in the valley. And so there's an awful lot of developable land. It's just there's not a lot of it, or there's quite a bit less available within city limits. And it's the community. When you say community, in my opinion, the community goes outside of the city limits. And that you just have to keep that in mind when you say that. Sure, there's a lot of development area.
Right, and if I can just put on my government cap for a second, that land doesn't fall under the property taxes of the city of Seward, though. And so having more land where the city of Seward has development so that it can grow in a sustainable way, I think that's an important consideration as well.
Well,
then you're talking about that bench up above SMIC.
Yeah.
Because that's all developable up there. You just got to get the road in there.
Yeah,
well,
and the utilities.
I was just thinking about those two pieces of private property, and the person that gave up putting in a bunkhouse because they didn't want or could not afford the utilities, and that now that we have that new subdivision assistance program where we can help those, like we just did with the subdivision in Forest Acres, I think that maybe if we make that more available or more known to developers, especially the developers of that private property. I think we can get some utilities spread out there with the help of the city. And also, I'm looking at the comprehensive plan, and under Port and Harbor Development 3.5, there is a very small part about SMIC. So I don't know where the SMIC enthusiasts were when we did this comp plan, and I'm not a big fan of how this turned out, but it just says under 3.5.12, plan for adequate port infrastructure that will serve the needs of users in the main industrial Alaska Railroad area and at SMIC. And then the only bullet point for SMIC is support the SMIC development plan to include new market trends and modern technology for ship repair and construction, shipping of natural resource products, boat storage, and other.
So, Cindy, to your question about like working with Ada, I know that that's something that the chamber is currently working on. Jason just recently coordinated a call between Tim Dillon and the director of Ada and several different entities around town, talking very broadly about ways that Ada can help Seward, but we talked a lot about the marine industry and development in the marine industry. So I know that they're still really excited to kind of come back to that plan that they did and to see how they can help. But I don't remember what the other agency was that was listed in the comp plan. What was the other?
The U.S. Economic Development Administration, EDA.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
Okay. Well, I don't know what their parameters are, whether they can help with infrastructure, or if they just help with marketing or financing, or how they could help. But I just was wondering whose Billy that was.
Yeah.
Let's make it Matt's.
Yeah.
Okay.
He can't respond.
Well, we can't take any action in a work session, so he's safe. He's safe tonight. We'll
Just
get you later,
everybody
Matt.
just say it's Matt's and we'll make him deal with it. I just wanted to let the PACAB Commission know that I will give in our next packet, just as an update, your guys' SMIC development spreadsheet, because I love that thing. I go to it and I used it for this. I was like, Brenda, send me the most current one. So I'll make sure that the Planning and Zoning Commission gets to see that side of how you do your reviews. And you know, we're always talking about the comp plan, and I've got to get my spill in. It's 2021. Our comp plan's only good till 2030, so we need to be working this next 9 years to make sure that we have all the things that we want to see in this comp plan to fruition.
Linda has her hand up.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Jackie, because that was one of the things that I wanted to bring up. As I'm not sure who takes the lead on that, if that's P&Z or who, but the comp plan's coming up. And also, guys, the strategic plan has not been touched since 1999. And who takes the lead on that? So it looks like Jackie's got an answer, so I'll be quiet.
That is a community development with planning and with the council. So it is something that, you know, before pre-COVID, everything we had discussed and planned to start that whole subject and really get involved in it. And so, you know, that is something that is going to be brought back to light and here shortly. So just know that it's my department and council that will be working on that strategic plan.
Cool, because it seems like doing them together makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, they should flow. They should be a team.
Yeah, good.
So, Cindy, maybe if we can if no one else has anything new to add, maybe if we can wrap up by just summarizing kind of where we got to tonight and kind of what our takeaways are.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to restate it, or I can state it in my way and you can correct me.
Go ahead and state what you think some of our action going forward could be, or maybe even if we don't know what the action would be, what the hope would be to look forward to.
Right. Okay, so from what I have in my notes, we're looking at adding dwelling. I'm looking through all of the dwellings. The dwelling multifamily 3 or more units as a conditional use of the industrial district across the board. No overlay, just adding it to the land uses allowed table. I think that was the only one that we decided we needed to move. Am I missing? I feel like we may have talked about something else, but are there...
We talked about personal services. And I think they're allowed outright, and I think they have a caveat. It says personal services, barber. What else do they say for personal services?
Shoes and tailor. Beauty, shoes, and tailor.
Yeah, let's get her shoes shined at SMIC. So yeah, I think it's allowed outright anywhere else, and I don't see, that there'd be a big problem with allowing it. They allow laundry over there, right?
Yeah.
The laundry, dry cleaning outright.
Yeah, and so they allow personal services, beauty, i.e. beauty, shoe, tailor, outright in office residential, auto commercial, harbor commercial, and central business district. And this whole land use allowed table is broken down to be principally commercial, and institutional is the only one that doesn't allow outright personal services. So I think, that would be a good recommendation to add that. Because like you said, they have a building, allow a convenience store, allow maybe some sort of a techie store that has to do with marine services, a barber shop, and some apartments above it. I think we might get somebody to want to develop something like that.
And Madam Chair, can I suggest that when you guys are looking at that you also look at the planned unit development? It's a conditional use in in different zonings, but it's not allowed right now in industrial area. And that might help with the growth in the area out there for future development.
Which one did you say?
Planned unit development.
Can you give me the definition of that, Jackie? Just
Yeah, let me get it for you.
Okay, thank you.
And
Planned
I
unit
see. It's planned unit development. I don't know what it is.
It's a land development under unified control that is planned and constructed in its entirety as a single development or operation, or a series of program stages. The development may include streets, circulation ways, utilities, residents, commercial buildings, open spaces, and other future sites and improvements, some of which may not be otherwise individually permitted.
Okay, it's allowed as a conditional use permit in 3 residential districts, out of commercial, central business, and resource management. Kind of
And
odd,
parks.
they're all over the board.
Right, no, it's not parks, sorry. But yeah, you've got those 3 higher of the dwellings, the R1, R2, and R3, and then it skips, goes to auto commercial and central business district. And like I said previously, if you're wanting to develop SMIC in such a way by opening up the ability for somebody to bring forward their plan of what they want to do with their property, you know, and going back to what Laura had said, when you talk about somebody that has private property out there, and right now may be very intimidated with knowing that they're industrial and they know that they can't do these things that they've looked into, this would give them the ability to bring forward that plan that, you know, we want to make this housing, or we want to make this a mixed use, but right now it's not available for that.
It might get their creative juices flowing a little more once they read that definition. I think somebody could plan a bowling alley and a laundromat and, you know, and housing and a park and parking lot and utilities all on their own, but that's huge. And maybe a contractor would look at planned unit development and go, yeah, I'll do that for you. Pay me the money and I'll plan it for you. So I think that's a good one, conditional use for that, planned unit development. So that's 3 changes to the land use allowed table, which will require, we'll have a work session, we'll have a meeting to put forth a resolution recommending changes to the affordable, or to the land use allowed table that would then go to council for adoption, and that's the process those changes would take.
Right. I do have one more, I have, 2 more things that I wanted to add really quick. And I do have a member that has to leave at 7:30, and so we're going to lose our quorum. So I'm going to speak really fast.
Okay.
In the land uses allowed table, there's a difference between business, retail, sales, and service, and then there's a separate line item for business, retail, sales, and service, industrial. I'm not sure where those, I haven't looked at the definitions, which I should, but I'd like to throw that out there as another place that we might just look at eliminating that category and just saying business, retail, sales, and service as outright in all. I guess maybe that's trying to keep industrial services out of the other districts, so I understand that, but I'm wondering why we're limiting the retail, sales, and service to industrial and what that encompasses specifically. So I just have a question. I have a question mark on that line item as well.
Okay. I'm going to write that down and make it a point of discussion when we review the land use allowed tables and the definitions on April 20th.
Well, we won't be
Can
reviewing
we
those.
advertise?
We won't be reviewing those definitions. We'll only be doing dwelling and lodging, but just so everyone knows, that definition isn't even in our definitions. So
Great, we could go for the moon on that one then,
yeah,
right?
so
Okay.
we'll definitely work on that.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. And then 3 more things that we've brought up tonight that I just want to list really quickly. So one is finding some way to limit nightly rentals. Maybe this is a broader discussion about changing the definition so that nightly rentals can be limited, and maybe when that happens, saying that nightlies are not allowed in the industrial district. The next point is looking at land sales and how to encourage development by selling some of that land. I think that is a really important piece. As a leaseholder out there, it was a really hard decision to build a big building. And it's a hard decision to think about building a bigger, better building when I know that I'm never going to have the opportunity to own the land. So as a business owner, it's keeping me from building a bigger space that I really want to do, but I can't do it if I don't own the land. So I understand that from a personal standpoint. I know that's hindering a lot of people from doing bigger and better things out at SMIC. And then the last thing was to Linda's point about this, the assessment district and the possibility of, you know, some sort of service area for SMIC to help with aid in the development of the fire services out there. So I think that was the last of the things we discussed, and I just want to say that I'm so appreciative of having this joint work session, and I hope that we can have a follow-on in the future to build off of what we did tonight.
Yes, I think we had a great one, and any final comments from anyone before we lose PACAB quorum? Seeing no hands waving at me on this screen, I'm going to go ahead and say we had a great meeting, and thank you all. Thank you all for your input. Keep showing up at our meetings, keep giving us input when we address the land use allowed table, the municipal land plan for sure, and then over the next 7 years, the comp plan. All right, and the strategic plan. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Susie.
Bye.